Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store. And we thank them for their support. You're listening to Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location at Cards Against Humanity in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is...
Rye, the movie guy, and sitting inside the fish tank is none other than producer Pat.
Hey guys, how's it going?
This week on Cinemajaw, Matt, a special episode.
Indeed. Quite a big one.
Talk about big. We are covering the top 10 films of the decade.
And this means something, too, because we've actually been covering films this entire decade.
Right?
On Cinemajaw.
We started late 2009.
Yep.
And you're right. We've been here doing this week in, week out for 10 years.
I was able to go back through my Evernote account and pull up my top 10 list from every year.
Really?
Yes.
I wasn't using Evernote as long. I was a paper guy when we started Cinemajaw.
I know.
Remember, I used to come with paper everything.
Right.
And all of that's in some big bin now that I can't...
See, had you been doing your
Index.
notes digitally, even then you'd be able to look back with ease, right?
Yes. We are recording this episode a few weeks before it airs. We have the holidays coming up. So we say this because...
You never know what's going to happen in movie news.
True. And also, it's odd because putting together a top 10 list of the decade when we haven't even...
Finished 2019.
Right, and have not recorded... You may hear a slip-up. We have not seen the latest Star Wars movie, Matt.
Right. And I mean, okay, so there's like 15 days left in the year, roughly, a couple more than that, but we're just about there.
Right. Now, when me and Matt sat down, we discussed this. We knew it was coming. Looking at the calendar, we said, hey, we got to have a best of show, best of the decade. And we both said we need someone to join us who
Smart.
is smart. A film critic,
Yeah.
someone we respect,
Yes.
and someone that's going to give us a quality opinion and maybe a little bit different than me and you just bickering back and forth, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So who did we select, Matt Kay?
Pamela Powell.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
I think this is going to be Pam's third appearance on
It is.
Cinemajaw.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Pam Powell, welcome back to Cinemajaw.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I guarantee you my choices will be unique.
Here we go.
This is another reason why we needed to have you. Just a different perspective, because as much as we argue, I think we kind of have similar taste in some areas.
Correct. Now, Pam is the creator of Real Honest Reviews. You can also find her reviews in the Daily Journal, WCIA, do I have that correct?
Correct.
And Real Talk with Chuck and Pam.
Correct. Yep. Those lots of different sites you can find me. You can't miss me, and even if you try to, you probably can.
And this, it seems, we've known you now for a long time. This seems like professionally the biggest year with you constantly going out to these parties out in L.A. for The Irishman. You were in New York for Marriage Story. Pretty cool.
It's been an incredible year, and it's amazing. You just see what doors open up, and you keep walking through, and maybe one day those doors will all close, and they'll lock the windows, so I can't even get in that way.
I doubt it, Pam.
But I'm just going to keep going along. It's interesting too. I didn't know that you guys started doing this the same year that I did. And so it's been 10 years exactly. And when you asked me to do this, I thought this is kind of a great celebration of a decade of doing this particular thing with film criticism. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, and Pam was the first familiar face I saw when I went to the Toronto International Film Festival this year. I'm walking the streets right outside. It's that first morning, and I'm frantic. I don't know where to go. And who do I run into? Pam. And it just made me feel so good, like, oh, she's going to help me along.
A little bit of home.
That's right. A little feeling of home and a cup of coffee in my hand, and we were both set to go, both heading off to 3-hour movies.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how we started. One thing I did want to mention, I said that you went to this Irishman.
Right.
It was the premiere?
It was the
What
LA
was it?
premiere.
Explain this, because it was pretty awesome.
It was pretty incredible. It was anything and everything that you could possibly imagine a Hollywood LA kind of premiere and party to be. It was a reception beforehand. Netflix sponsored all of this, flew a bunch of us out there, stayed at this really kind of swanky, wonderful hotel called The Edition. And then we went to the premiere where everybody, and I mean everybody in this film was there. You name them.
wow.
Martin Scorsese, Lee, Robert De Niro, Pesci, Pacino, everybody was there.
On the red carpet?
On the red carpet, and then in front of the audience at the Chinese theater, in front of the audience, they had 2 theaters packed to the gills with people to watch the premiere of this, and they went into both auditoriums to introduce the film. I mean, everybody was just absolutely, their jaws were on the floor and their eyes were bugged out. We were all just glued because this is Hollywood. These are iconic legends of Hollywood standing before us.
Titans.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we watched the film, and then, and that's not the end, we went to this crazy party. And any strange kind of thing that you can possibly think of in this elaborate setup of a hotel in the back with a pool and women in bubbles rolling through and with bathing caps on and people rolling handmade cigars. And it was incredible fun.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, I didn't get enough sleep, but hey, you can do that later, right?
Yeah, sleep after the party.
That's right. And the film was really good, so that was kind of cool too. Bonus there.
Totally. So, Jawheads, this is going to be a little bit different of a show. We're not going to do the normal segments.
Right.
We are just going to concentrate on our top 10 of the decade, since it's such a monumental list here, Matt K.
Yeah, call it epic even.
Before we get to that list, I had wanted to sort of start the film conversation of the decade, and I like that, Pam, you brought up this idea that you have been doing film reviews for 10 years, much like me and Matt K. And the question, and you brought up Netflix at the end here, and that's where I wanted to start, was the rise of the streaming service, Netflix in particular, through this decade. And I remember me and Matt K, when we started Cinemajaw, Matt had Netflix and was streaming, and I looked this up. They started streaming movies in 2007, but it was sort of junk. It was older B movies. Their first original content, which is shocking, 2013, House of Cards. They didn't do a movie until 2014.
Lilyhammer was first.
Okay, well, it's 2013, though, is the year. Mm-hmm. So from 2013, they're just producing something, to 6 years later, the end of 2019, the powerhouse that Netflix has become. And I throw that question out, good, bad, what did you think of all of the streaming, looking at 10 years of it?
You know, I think that everybody needs to catch up with Netflix. I think they are ahead of the curve with all of this. People are streaming. People in studios don't want people to stream, but that's how we're living our lives now, and Netflix acknowledges that, and they're supporting that and giving us great content in order to be able to see these wonderful films. I think, you know, if you don't embrace the change, you're going to get left behind. They're embracing it and they're pushing it forward. And like I said, they're ahead of the curve. And we're going to see a lot of things from Hulu and Amazon. Apple Plus TV is coming out with their original content, both TV series and movies. So I think this is the wave of the future. There are, I think, 6 major
Disney Plus.
Disney Plus, 6 major not studios, but entities that are going to be leading us with streaming. There are actually 271 options for people to use a la carte on their TV programs now, which is crazy. 271 streaming options.
That's nuts. Crackle. There's a bunch. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more to add to that. I think it's generally it's a good thing, and there has been a lot of pushback from the industry and people that are very much, I don't know, cinemaphiles who can't let go of the big silver screen. And I agree. And Ryan Ostreich, who runs the Music Box Theater, told us about why 70 millimeter is so important, and just how much light is coming through makes it so much better of a picture, and that's true. But at the end of the day, I think it's more important that you see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in some way or another than not see it at all if you miss it in the theater. And now it's just much more available for people to get into cinema, and then hopefully they will have those experiences in the big theaters later once they fall in love.
Right.
You know? So.
Well, and it's also interesting too. I believe it was AMC, and I don't know who the other major theater company was that was banning Netflix from showing their films there. And so Netflix is bucking the system, and the bigger studios are saying, you can't do that. Well, you know what? If you're going to try and buck the system, there's going to be some fallout from that, but there's going to be a way to skirt around it as well. And as you guys probably know a little bit about me, if you're about bucking the system, I'm right behind you.
I agree. I do have to say that because we're in Chicago and, you know, being film critics and having access to the screenings, it doesn't affect us as much because we're more or less given the option to see The Irishman on the big screen, Marriage Story on the big screen. But if there's someone that wants to see it on the big screen, they are being left behind If you search Twitter when it was going on, there were people that were driving upwards of 350 miles to get to a movie theater to see it because they might be in an area that only has AMC theaters and these chains that aren't going to show the new Netflix movie. And I think that'll iron itself out in the long run, but it does stink right now for some individuals that want to experience it. And, I think it played at its height at about 250 screens, I think, across the country, when, a new blockbuster is premiering at over 4,000 screens. So
Right. We're sort of lucky to live in a major market like New York, LA, Chicago. We can see just about anything, and plus being film critics, like you said. But, somebody in Nowheresville, it's going to be difficult.
And it is different tastes. I had a screener of The Two Popes at my house, but I was also had the chance to see it in the theater at a screening, and I chose to go to the theater because I like if I can make it and it's easy for me, I'd rather see anything in the theater than watch it at home. That's me.
And I agree. I mean, you do miss out on things. I saw Richard Jewell on my computer screen. Now, you guys know that I'm old and visually impaired, so I have a large computer screen. But then I watched it a second time on a home theater, and I've got a pretty amazing setup. I missed things on my computer that I now saw on this 80-inch screen that I have. So you do miss things. I can imagine if I would have seen it in the theater, I would have even gotten more out of the performances. And that's what I missed, is some of the subtleties in the performances. I didn't see them as closely in my computer as I did on the theater.
That's a fair point.
Second issue I wanted to bring up was the, I think something that we're finally correcting, and that is we're seeing more and more women directors. When you look back 10 years ago, across the decade, it seems like we're finally, by putting all the pressure on Hollywood, righting the ship here.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
I think we got a long way to go.
We do got a long way to go, but at least I felt like 2019, there were a lot of great films directed by women that finally had the opportunity to make, a film.
Some serious headway,
Yeah. So I think we're getting there, and that's encouraging.
Well, and I like to see festivals like Sundance and excuse me, Tribeca and Toronto making a concerted effort. Toronto International Film Festival has Share Her Journey, and their goal is in 5 years is to have gender parity, which is fantastic. And I think that's leading the way and opening those doors for female directors and writers to actually hit the road and run with it. Unfortunately, as we're seeing, and you mentioned that this is recorded, so not all the awards have been announced yet as far as nominations, we aren't seeing these old, stodgy entities of the awards like Critics' Choice that I'm a part of, as well as who knows what's going to happen with the Academy. But Golden Globes, they're not recognizing female writers and directors the way that I think they should be. I think that's got a long way to go, and until we have that gender parity as well, those women aren't going to have the opportunities to be recognized or have the chances and opportunities in their future as well.
Yeah. Was it within this past decade that Catherine Bigelow won Best Director?
Throw that in the fish tank. I think it was 2009.
It might have been.
Right off the bat.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. What year she won.
She was the first, if I'm...
Yes,
yeah.
and only.
Right? First and only.
First and only.
Yeah, I agree. That needs to change.
It's still at this point, unfortunately, it's still a big deal when a woman gets nominated. Like they made a big deal when Greta Gerwig.
Right.
I'd like to see us having this discussion 10 years from now and saying, wow, we finally got over that hurdle, and it's not a big deal if 5 women are nominated for Best Director. Nobody's shocked.
Right.
Why should they be?
And that's the way it should be.
Exactly.
Hopefully, we're headed in that direction.
Yes. All right. Before we get to our top 10, for the jawheads that want to read your reviews, find you online, where's the best place to do all that good stuff, Pam?
Take a look at realtalkwithchuckandpam.com. You can find both my film critic partner, Chuck Koplinski, and I with all of our television reviews, radio reviews, as well as written. You can also go to realhonestreviews.com or find me on Facebook.
Bingo. You've done that before.
I have.
Yeah, you're good at it.
Nice. We got to get Chuck in here. And
Absolutely.
If we weren't doing a big top 10 list, we would have done it this episode, but we will get Chuck in. So, Pam, you have the honor of getting us started. Your list, looking at it, all the years pretty well represented?
No, they're not actually.
No?
It's kind of clustered, which I was kind of amazed at. And I wish that what was that like electronic note thing that you were doing back in 2009? Evernote. Didn't know about that. I was pen and paper as well. So when you asked me to do this, I'm like, oh God, where are my
through old
lists?
notebooks.
Yeah, couldn't find them. And I've also gone through 3 computers since then, so who knows where I wrote anything down. I'm going to give a little bit of a long-winded preface here. My list, as I alluded to before, is going to be a little unique. I am female, so I think that I represent less than 20% of the female critics out there. So these films, I want to represent me and who I am as a person and who I am as a critic. So these movies have to speak to me in some way. They also have to be a great story and told perfectly well in order for me to have them be on my top list.
Did you even have 10?
It was tough. It was tough. And the funny thing is, well, let me go back to my criteria. It has to be entertaining, and I like a complicated story. And it can be humorous and complicated, but I like something that makes me think and makes me escape into the movie so that I am a part of that movie, and I don't know who's smacking their lips behind me or crunching some potato chips.
That's Matt Kay for sure.
How are you doing that?
I try to be quiet with the potato chips.
Smack you next time you're next to me. So then on top of that, then I look at the cinematography and all the other aspects that go into filmmaking. But it's got to be a great story told well, something that I can escape into that's entertaining and that relates to me in some way. It's my story in some way. So that was my criteria, because I could have gone on to, stating the status quo of what everybody else is saying are the greatest movies. So that brings me, long-winded, to number 10. And I had a tie.
I'm nervous for number 10.
6-way tie.
After that.
Whew. Okay, you guys are going to be a little probably amazed at what my number 10 is. I thought about Roma. I thought about The Irishman. I thought about Capernaum and Wildlife. But at the end of the day, I am a Taika Waititi fan. And so I went with not Jojo Rabbit, which is a wonderful film and will make my top 10 list this year for films of 2019. Hunt for the Wilder People from 2016.
Wow. I like this pick.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy story. It's something that is about a little boy who is a foster kid who goes and lives with these foster parents. The father, if you will, played by Sam Neill, is reluctant, to say the least. And it's an adventure story between the two of them and how they survive in the wilderness in New Zealand.
The little kid, I think, is Ricky Baker.
Ricky, that's right. He's got the little rap song that goes along with, and I won't do that for you. I won't hurt your ears. But this was something that was just really silly and ridiculous and touching and sad, and yet still touched upon some social issues as well. I thought it was a film that has stayed with me this was 2016. It stayed with me for the last 3 years, and I can watch that movie over and over again and get something different out of each of the characters every single time.
Did you see Boy from Taika?
I didn't. I missed that one.
Catch up with
That's
that one.
a good one. And can we throw this fact into the fish tank? What year What We Do in the Shadows came out? Which he did. Look that up, because I remember...
That's right before. I think that might be
Right.
2015.
I'm interested to see how close those two
Yeah,
were.
I think they're pretty darn close.
Yeah, like it. Matt, are you gonna preference your list in some way? Did these movies speak to you?
Well,
does any movie speak to you?
yes, Ryan. Movies do speak to me. I don't think I'd be doing this show for 10 years. I will preface my list. This was very difficult, first of all. I have 25 movies on my list, and I was shuffling them even as I was driving here at stoplights. When I was stopped, I would be like, this one deserves to be on. This was difficult, gut-wrenching, and painful to do. But I will say that these are the movies are my top 10 of the decade today. Tomorrow, it could be different. It's almost about a mood you're in. So, all right, that's enough preface from me. So, in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, you and I had our first date where we went to a movie together and sat next to one another.
Aw.
Yeah.
Sweet already.
Right. And the movie we saw, it was a birthday present from Ryan to me, The Babadook.
Ah, very good.
Yes. And this was the directorial debut from a female filmmaker, Jennifer Kent.
Yes.
Who just sort of knocked it right out of the park. based on a short film that I have subsequently seen, and I think the feature is better, but the short, you can see the seed, the kernel of the idea. Babadook was a fresh horror movie that explored themes we hadn't seen explored before, scary as hell, and I love the IP, the monster Babadook. Terrifying. Still scares the hell out of me.
I loved that movie.
Me
and she's
too.
got The Nightingale now, which is another incredible film, not the Babadook at all.
No, I've
Totally
heard,
different.
I got to see it. I know it's very brutal and tough to watch, but I'm a fan of her, so I'm going to check it out.
Boy, strong picks coming out of the gate. I like it, guys. My preference, my list, basically movies that I like to see more of, right? These are films, and for some reason, they're different elements of movies that I say, yes, I wish we could see more of that for on the big screen, and we don't get it enough. My number 10 movie came out way back in 2010. And I will say this, 8 of the 10 years are represented on my list. So spread it out pretty good. Didn't mean to do it either. Just looked at that while you guys were talking. Number 10 came out in 2010, and something I want to see more of, and this movie does that, is a blockbuster movie, large scale, original, meaning it's not based on a book, comic book, sequel, anything of that, but is given the budget it deserves. 2010, Christopher Nolan did that with Inception. My number 10 pick, like I say, big blockbuster. Yes, when I say original, I know Matt's said it mimics a little bit of the Matrix ideas and whatnot, but this is dreams, layers of dreams. And I love later that he went back and he did Dunkirk, which he also tackles timelines going on in Dunkirk, much like he did early on with Inception, with the different stages of the dreams and what's taking place at the time. All the special effects, fantastic. And I think, I was thinking about this, as I have 2 movies that I think are incredible scores, because we don't talk about the music that much
We
on
don't.
here.
Yeah, not enough.
And if I had to say it, I'd say Inception's in the top 3 best scores of the decade.
It certainly
it's
is
literally
memorable.
incredible.
Yeah.
And it was mimicked years after. You would go to the movies and I would hear something. I'm like, oh my God, they're ripping off the
To this day.
Inception. Yeah.
Even like
in trailers you hear it still today.
right, like Annihilation. It's got that heavy synth, that kind of
Yep.
thing. Yeah.
So for all that reason, and the great conversation that it had, if you had saw Inception, when we remember the top spinning and everybody came out, what did you think? Was he dreaming? Wasn't? I
Right.
love that kind of conversation, and especially within a big blockbuster that's extremely entertaining, and then to come out and have like a thoughtful conversation about the movie as well. It's one of my favorite things. So.
Okay, I want you to agree with me to see the film together so that you can explain a few things to me. I've seen it 3 times, and I'm still incredibly frustrated by it.
Yeah. In a nutshell, and I've said this on the podcast before, that the best way to think about it is the inception that's actually happening. So the inception is that they're putting the idea into someone's brain.
Right.
And that's being sold to you the whole time that he's going to do that to his wife.
Right?
It's actually happening to Leonardo DiCaprio's character. That's the inception.
That's your interpretation.
That's my interpretation.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that at the end, it actually doesn't matter if he's dreaming or not, because the inception worked and he at least got rid of the guilt.
Ah.
My interpretation.
Now I have to watch it again. That's
know,
actually,
right?
I don't know if I've ever heard you explain that quite that well before.
Yeah, that's my number 10, Inception. Into our 9s, guys. This is fun.
This is awesome. You guys are going to be blown away by my number 9. You will never in a million years predict what I have chosen for number 9. Stars Ryan Gosling.
Okay.
And we also have Carey Mulligan and Albert Brooks.
Wow.
I know. Yes, Drive is
Drive, number 9.
right. Does that blow you away? This is a movie that has stuck with me ever since I first saw it. I mean, and I'm not a fan of Ryan Gosling, but this is, I think, one of his better roles, probably one of his best roles.
I think
for
it might
me.
be his very best.
Don't
role.
you think?
Yes.
I mean, he is incredibly subdued, but he's complicated and layered, and he only allows those emotional layers to be exposed very, very slowly. And his relationship with Carey Mulligan, and then I think it's Oscar Isaac, it plays opposite him, and it's a powerfully emotional film that you don't expect when it's incredibly violent, very fast-paced, yet you have this heart-wrenching relationship that is exposed throughout the entire film as well. And Albert Brooks, I'm a huge fan of his.
Same.
Defending Your Life is one of my all-time favorite
Love
movies.
that movie too.
And to see him play a bad guy, a mafia type of guy,
and
was
believably.
Ooh, he scared me
agree.
to death.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. And let's not forget that wonderful elevator scene where he kisses her.
Right.
Everything about that is, he just breathes cool on the screen.
Absolutely. And the stunts that are in
jacket.
this, I mean, on the jacket, yeah. The stunts, though, are incredible. And is there any CGI in 2011 like this, or are they real stunts? I don't know.
Don't know either.
No?
I don't know either.
Pretty amazing, though.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. Good pick.
That is a great pick. That is a really good pick. I love that movie as well. At number 9, I also went with a bit of an action adventure. This is probably where I'm going to start losing you guys, although just stick with me. I promise the list has its ups and downs, but I got to be honest. Everybody knows I'm a fan of the Marvel films, right? This is no...
Are you really?
Yeah, it's true. And I had to decide, because this largely unfolded over the past decade, I guess it started in 2008, but for the most part, it was the past 10 years. And I'm not saying this is the best film, but I think this is the one that stands alone the best. And it's 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy. It is an adventure story set in space. It's the Star Wars movie we didn't get with the prequels, and the next Indiana Jones we didn't get with the Crystal Skull. It's a whole bunch of things we really wanted, and a talking raccoon in a tree to boot. Is totally out of left field, strange movie. Everybody predicted it was going to be a flop, and it was somehow a mega hit, surprise hit. And there, I've said it.
Wow.
Guardians of the Galaxy.
I've been on record saying that Guardians of the Galaxy is one of my favorite Marvel films, me not being very big on the Marvel Universe, but I enjoyed that one for all the reasons you just said. The adventure feel, I remember being like, wow, I wish they were all this good, because I was along for the ride.
Many of them are, Ryan.
And a lot of that had to do with the lead, Chris
Pratt.
Pratt, yes.
Yeah, I agree.
He was great.
He was wonderful. And that's one of my favorite Marvel movies as well. I had a lot of fun with that. And I love the music in that one, too. They call it Mom
Definitely.
Pop.
Favorite mixtape. In fact, I came back from Toronto with a sticker of that,
yes.
and I gave it to Matt with the mixtape.
Oh,
from
really?
there on there. It's pretty awesome. Nice pick, Matt. I knew Marvel was going to be on there. It's just a matter
I never
of how
would have
many.
guessed it.
Hey, it's only 9, guys. Got a long way to go.
Hey, I went outside the box here, probably for jawheads that have been listening for a long time. It's not outside of the realm here that I picked this at number 9. 2015, I got an first animated movie we're going to talk about. And me and Matt had ranked the Pixar movies. That's why I say it shouldn't be a shock. And we both agreed this is the best Pixar movie of all time. At number 9 of the decade, I have Inside Out.
Yay!
Just barely missed my list.
I know, same here,
Another theme that I want to touch on, because I was talking about the Netflix and the rise of streaming, was how the theater experience for all of my picks, most of them are. In fact, 9 of the 10 that I saw in the theater. And I can recall who I saw it with, the experience I had with the movie. And I think that has something to do with it. For me, I'm such a theater guy. And Inside Out, no exception. I saw this on a Saturday morning. I didn't go to the press screening. I saw it on a Saturday morning. It was packed with kids, how a Pixar movie's going to be. And I sat there in the middle of the theater, just
The creepy guy in the back.
bawling my eyes out in scenes, and knowing that the kids were not getting this at all, and I was just emotionally a wreck watching this movie.
Isn't it so smart?
Loving it. It's so
Very
smart.
smart.
It was imaginative and important for kids to realize that they got to deal with this emotion, sadness, just as much as they have to do with anger and joy. I literally was just shocked at how good Inside Out was, and it remains this day. I think it's an animated masterpiece.
I think it's one of Pixar's best. Absolutely, I loved it, and Coco was pretty high up there as
Great
well
one
for
also.
me. Yeah,
Coco was good.
Yeah. So that was my number 9, Inside Out.
awesome. All right, are we on to number 8?
Into our
Here we
8s.
go.
All right. I chose from 2015 The Big Short.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right.
This one was. It was a unique film to me because, and I know that breaking of the fourth wall is nothing new in filmmaking. I think they were doing it back in the 1970s with like Annie Hall and Mel Brooks. I think Blazing Saddles, they did it as well. But this one was one where they broke the fourth wall at very specific points to make this film a very educational film.
Accessible even.
Yeah, in dumbing it down and I am more than willing to admit that I need financing for dummies 101. I mean, I need that, and I think most of America does too, to understand what happened with the housing crisis and the mortgage plan and everything that went awry during that time period.
Yeah, the subprime mortgages.
Yeah. And the cast was absolutely amazing, and to make this film, like you said, accessible, but to make it humorous as well, when a lot of people lost their shirts, literally and figuratively, is quite a talent. And Adam McKay and Charles Randolph, who also is giving us Bombshell later on this month, it'll be released by the time this airs, it really, I think, ticks all the boxes. It's funny, it's smart, it's educational, and it brings us in to understand something that happened in every one of our lives. So that made number 8 for me.
It's a great one. I know it made my top 10 list that particular year.
Did it?
So I was a big fan.
It's everything that the Laundromat wasn't.
Tried to be.
Yeah. Such a disappointment.
You didn't warn us enough, Ryan. You saw it in Toronto and didn't warn
I know,
either
we
of
saw
us.
that. Yeah, we were in the same
we saw
screening.
in Chicago. Yeah. Shame on you.
It was a bummer.
Yeah.
All right. Over to me for number 8. A filmmaker in his late 70s, I think, came back to the screen with...
Can I just say that I believe me and Matt have the same number 8, which is good.
That's interesting. This is a film where this gets bandied about quite a bit, this term. Like, every second of this movie is perfect. Like, I don't think there's a single flaw. It is one of the most action-packed, feminist even, films of
We
the
definitely
decade.
have the same number 8.
Mad Max Fury Road. It's just an absolute cinematic masterpiece.
I'm
And
right with you.
It could be higher, but I need to watch it more.
George Miller is the director. And yeah, can we throw that in the fish tank? How old he
Septuagenarian,
is?
I think he's
80 something.
Is he in his 80s?
I think he is.
Okay.
And you are right, Matt. Action-packed.
Yeah. Front to back.
You can actually look at this movie as being the climax of an action movie drawn out.
The whole
Oh,
thing.
whole thing
so
is-
drawn out.
Is the whole thing
I'm
was
getting the
a
sense
total
that
blast.
Pam didn't like this film.
Did you hear the door shutting?
But a lot of practical effects.
All practical.
Yeah, right. Stunts used and able to like capture all of this on the big screen, like the chase scenes. It really had the scope of like this huge adventure that we hadn't seen. It's going to sound odd since like a Lawrence of Arabia to see like the scope of what was going on with the extras and everything.
I don't think
that was going
sounds.
on.
I don't think that sounds odd at all. It's a throwback to old school filmmaking. And Pam, even if you didn't like this film, you have to admit when you saw the guy with the guitar and the flamethrower on top of the rig, you had to say, "Now that's some spectacle."
I laughed. That was that. I did
think
laugh
we all
during
laughed.
that. That's good. At least I had one same emotion as the rest of you guys while you were watching that. That one to me was just like sensory bombardment. I needed to get out of there. That is one of the worst films on my list of all time. I despised that film.
Oh,
You didn't even like Furiosa? Like
No,
give him
nothing.
some
Zero.
girl power?
Nope.
Oh.
Nope. Didn't like it.
cinematography fantastic, stunts excellent.
Sound design phenomenal.
Great.
You got to remember,
Everything.
I start with tell me a story that's good and tell it well. It didn't. It
We
didn't
can
tick
agree
off
to
that
disagree
box.
on this one, Pam.
All right,
Matt Kay's number 8, Mad Max Fury Road. Ride the movie, guys. Number 8, Mad Max Fury Road. I actually thought when I put that at 8, I thought, hope I'm not stealing Matt's thunder. He may have that as his number 1. I'm not kidding. I thought that might have been your number 1. So into our 7s we go.
Oh, here we are. All right. Okay, so this was one of the things that was difficult about putting this list together is I love documentaries. So I just kind of put documentaries to a different group. I didn't even approach those. Foreign films can be wonderful as well, and I did pick a foreign film for this one. It's a Danish film called The Guilty. It's in 2018. Did you guys catch that one?
No.
Have not.
I highly recommend it. It's by Gustav Miller, and he writes and directs it, and it's basically a one-man show. There's a police officer, Asker, and is played by Jacob Sedergren, and he has been demoted to being a dispatcher. And he answers the phone, and a woman has been kidnapped. And he has to talk through everything that this woman is experiencing and trying to help her. He gets disconnected a couple of times. He has a little bit of interaction with some people that are there at the station with him, but for the most part, it is a one-man show, and this entire film takes place in our heads as the events unfold, and he's having a conversation with this woman on the other end.
And so you just see his face in frame?
That's it. That's
Wow.
it. He walks a little bit, but for the most part, we are just like glued to his face. To be able to take something like that and bring you into the imagination of what's happening. When I got done with the movie, I couldn't believe that I didn't see all the events that he was describing was happening before me. It was all in my imagination. It was like reading a book. It was incredible. I was on the edge of my seat for the entire film, and I found myself holding my breath. My Apple Watch was telling me to breathe. It was absolutely incredible. I highly recommend this. In fact, I think they're going to remake this into an American film.
Well,
which I
I
hope
was
they
gonna
screw
say,
it up.
Didn't they
Why
make,
wouldn't they?
wasn't there a
Yeah.
similar film with was it either Halle Berry
Yeah,
or
something
Caller,
similar.
The Caller?
Yeah, The Caller, and she had to go and chase people down and stuff. And it lacked imagination.
Okay.
This had incredible imagination.
This is pure imagination.
Just wrote it
It
down
is.
in the journal. I
Yeah.
like it.
Did Good,
What
yay.
was, what was the film, I believe last year, where the whole thing took place on screens with the girl who goes missing?
yeah.
And the dad who's sort of trying to piece it together?
Right.
God, what was the name of that one?
I don't know.
Can we throw that in?
Yeah, throw it in the fish tank. It's going to bother me. But I love a movie that's creative in the way it tells its story.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's
this
good.
is.
All right, swings it to me. In 2015, we got a very interesting movie that was not my pick at number 7, but sort of led to what is my pick. The predecessor to my pick was shot all on iPhone and introduced us to Sean Baker. He followed it up then in 2017 with a movie that was my favorite of the year and I think is one of the best movies, obviously, of the decade, and it is The Florida Project.
I'm so glad this is on your list. This was number 11 on mine.
Really?
It just missed my list.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Love it.
The movie is, I think what makes this movie cool, when we first talked about it, I said how punk rock it is. And it is in a way. The colors are so bright and vibrant and oversaturated. And then just the raw honesty of the characters, especially the mom, who's like obviously not in a great place in her life as far as accepting responsibility. But they don't make her into a villain. She's just a person. And everyone in the movie is just who they are, for better or for worse. And we get to see this slice of life through the eyes of a kid. And it's not pretty, but it's not horrible either. It's just life. And I don't know if that's ever been captured quite as well as what Sean Baker did.
That was definitely the beauty of the film, was that we got to see it through a 6-year-old's eyes.
Yeah.
There's no, they don't differentiate rich and poor the way an adult does, the right and the wrong, and the innocence of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the ending, just crushing. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this one.
You know, have you ever heard of the story, The Emperor's New Clothes?
Yes.
Okay, every year I have an award called the Emperor Award. And that year,
You didn't like this
gave it
pick
to
either?
I
Come
couldn't
on,
stand
Pam.
it. I'm sorry. Although I have to say, I like your interpretation of it. That's the best interpretation and review I've heard of the film that makes me think about it maybe a little less harshly.
You want to hear an even weirder one, since Rye gave his
Sure.
weird interpretation of Inception? I think, watch it again with the idea that Willem Dafoe's character is God.
Oh, I like that.
He
William
does this
Dafoe
thing-
is God.
Well, we can agree to that. He even does the thing where he goes, "Let there be light," and the lights turn on in the
Right.
motel. So
Oh,
watch it again.
interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I don't know if Baker was going for that or not.
Yeah.
But I just got a taste of that when I was watching it, and it's interesting.
Okay, all right. I did like Dafoe's portrayal of that character in that film. I mean, I can't unlike William Dafoe in anything. I mean, he's great in anything
Yeah.
that he does. But somebody needed to put that little girl in a corner. Okay, go ahead.
Swings it over to my number 7, and I have a film of 2019 being represented here on the Best of the
Wow.
Decade. And as you have heard, we are recording this earlier before I've even sat down to do my top 10 list of 2019. And so I'm not even 100% sure this is going to be number 1. That may sound odd, but when I looked at this film, I thought this is the film, when I'm looking back at this decade, that I'll probably think of from 2019, if that makes sense. Does it?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I got to see this one a second time in the theater, and it was on that second time that it really hit me emotionally a lot harder on the key moments. I'm speaking of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino.
Wow. This made it for you.
Yes, at number 7. And the scene that really got me, seeing it a second time, that at first I enjoyed this scene, but the second time really, really got me with that emotional wallop, was when the characters all go out to dinner on the night of the murder. And it starts with all of the neon signs lighting up all along Hollywood. And the song Baby You're Out of Time starts playing by the Rolling Stones.
Great tune.
And it can be seen two ways, because one, these characters and old Hollywood itself is running out of time. This is sort of the end of that old era of Hollywood. 1. 2, it's a tribute in a lot of ways to Sharon Tate. This was the very end of Sharon Tate. This was her last night. And now seeing the movie, we know that he changed things in a fairy tale way, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which gives us that happy ending that maybe only movies can do sometimes. So it was a beautiful send-off, and seeing that bittersweet moment of Baby You're Out of Time, it just crushed me on a second viewing, and I thought, boy, I go back and I watch this on repeat viewings, I'm just going to enjoy it more and more as we get to that ending scene. I'm not going to be so much thrown off by the violence and the shock of that. I'm going to be more hit by the emotional
the weight
fact.
of the emotion. Yeah. I agree. Although I don't know if I would have put this above some of his other films of the decade. I don't know. It's an interesting pick. Not a bad pick at all.
It is an interesting pick. Excuse me. I'm not a QT fan per se, and while I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I loved the relationships that he developed in this film. It was so un-QT, and I really enjoyed that. And then the last 20 minutes of the film happened, and I did not enjoy that. So
I love the violence.
Yeah. Unless it's a part of the entire film and it drives that plot forward, I thought it was cartoonish, which I guess is his type of violence anyway. And it was such a disappointment to me, the end of it. So.
See, I like the ending, mainly, like I say, because this is what the movies can do. It can be whatever we want it to be. It's a story, and maybe this is what everybody in the theater really wish would have happened.
Right.
So let's just go over the top bonkers at it.
We all wish Hitler would have been shot
right
too, but how many times, this is the one thing I have a problem with this film, is how many times is he going to dip his pen into that inkwell? I think... Okay, you did it with an Inglourious Basterds.
Right.
You did it again with Once Upon a Time. Please, QT, don't do it a third
Well,
time.
he says he's only got one more movie to make, right? He's
so
number 10?
He's going to be done after 10. Well,
I can hope.
He holds to that.
Ozzy Osbourne said no more tours in like 85.
He didn't remember that, though.
Into our 6s we go.
Ooh, all right. Okay, this one I'm sure that is going to be overlapping. Don't say anything. I'm sure it'll be on your list as well.
Okay.
It was from 2018. I saw it at Sundance, and then I think it came out this year, though. It's called Ophelia, right? That's on your list, right? No? Yeah? No?
Maybe. We'll wait and see.
All right. This is, as you probably have guessed, it's part of a Shakespearean retelling, and it's told from Ophelia's point of view, the story of Hamlet. And it stars somebody from the Star Wars series, Daisy Ridley.
Right.
She stars in this, and this is a retelling of Hamlet and how her life is and how she perceives everything. And it tells so much backstory of all the characters, and she's got strength and power, and she doesn't take any crap from anybody. And this is a female empowering movie that makes a lot more sense than the original did, which is kind of cool to see. We understand Claudius and his motivations. We also have, I think it's Naomi Watts plays two characters. She's the queen as well as the witch. And something that is very throwback to Shakespeare when he would have a person play more than one character.
Sure.
It was a really rich story. It was beautifully shot in Prague, and this is done by Claire McCarthy, female director, who really hones in on a lot of the great details of Shakespeare, keeping it in today's language, even though it's set back in that era, but putting in a few little Shakespearean quotes as well to keep us anchored into his roots.
Is this Hamlet 2?
Kinda.
Well, I'm glad
Hamlet
that
again.
you brought this up because this is already on my list to see.
Good,
So
good.
now even getting this nice recommendation, I'm definitely going to see
Very
it. It's
good.
already out for rental. So
Oh,
for
absolutely.
JawHeads, you can stream it or grab the DVD at the Redbox or whatever you do.
This was 2019?
It came out this year in theaters, but it was a part of the festival circuit last year.
Got it.
So it said, I think on IMDb, it said in 2018, but it's really a 2019 film.
For consideration for this year.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it. All right. Over to me. And at number 6, I have a movie. I got a feeling Pam's not going to like this one. I'm sort of getting a sense of your
Are
taste
ya?
in general. Harmony Korine is a filmmaker that I became familiar with from Kids, of course, way back in the day. And when I saw 2013's Spring Breakers, it just about blew my mind completely. It's a movie that goes in a direction you really don't think it's going to go. And in fact, none of the characters can believe it's going in the direction it goes. At first, it feels like this, MTV kind of a teen sex comedy, like teenagers romping about in bikini spring break movie, right? And then there's a bit of a turn where things get a little too wild, and then it just keeps getting darker and stranger and darker and stranger, and the neon colors just ramp up to the point where it's just black and neon, and the girls are all wearing these bright pink ski masks, like a very famous punk band, female punk band, whose name I can't mention because it's lurid, to say the least. And what transpires at the end of the movie, this crime, this violence, is so disturbing. The movie just left me kind of shocked, and I loved it. I also think it's James Franco's, if not his best, certainly in his top 3 with this character Alien. I loved Spring Breakers, loved it.
Wow.
I didn't hate the pick. I enjoyed it as well. I was never as high up on it as Matt Kay, but I enjoyed it as well.
I missed it. But I'll tell you what,
classic.
I'll watch that if you watch Ophelia. Is that a deal?
Deal. You're
Deal.
gonna hate.
Done.
I'll probably like Ophelia. I love some Shakespeare, but I guarantee you don't like Spring Breakers.
I'll give it a shot, though.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Deal.
Swings it
Very
over.
Mad Max-ish, at least in its tone.
Okay.
I don't know about that.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to
That's
say is
steering
it's
it
sensory overload, very much.
Okay. I can wear earplugs.
Okay.
My number 6, very ambitious title. I think a lot of people look at this film and hail it as the best film of the decade for the people who like this filmmaker in particular. I actually don't like most of his films, but this particular one actually did hit me as well. 2011, Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life.
Very controversial pick.
But I think now more people have come along on the side to say it's a masterwork, especially when you go back in time and look at 2011. It seemed like everybody was somewhat divided, and now I'm seeing it on a lot of lists, is what I'm saying, is a lot of people are actually picking it as number 1, or it's popping up all along the decade list. I went back and I watched it about 2 weeks ago as I knew we were getting ready to do this, and I had only seen it in 2011, and the effect it had on me then, it's like, wow, what an ambitious movie. And we don't get many of those movies that are going for, everything in a film, and can actually more or less pull it off, right? You get the scope of this small story of a family in Texas to the creation of the universe,
Right.
to dinosaurs thrown in there, and what does it mean to have faith? Where should you turn your faith? What should you believe in? Why is all this happening? It asks a lot of big questions, and I watched it the second time, and again was just in awe of the filmmaking. I couldn't
Right.
believe that he could tell so much in scale, and it all does really have a spiritual feeling watching the movie. It should have just gone bonkers and not worked, but in somehow he crafted this and made it what I would call a miracle of a movie.
Right. I loved that one, too. I am remiss for not putting that on my list. Well done.
Still haven't seen it. A big confession, but I need to.
It's a great one. It really is.
You've seen A Hidden Life. That's
I
the one
have
that you
seen A
saw
Hidden
in,
Life.
yeah, that's the
Right.
first day of Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I just got the screeners.
I did too.
Something worth seeing?
Have you guys haven't watched it yet?
I haven't
haven't.
yet. I haven't had a chance. It's 3.5 hours long.
I'll say this: it's the second best Terrence Malick movie.
Okay.
So.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I
Wow.
was a fan. All right, what we're going to do is take a break. That was our first 5 films.
Right, 10 through 6. There we
Yes. When we come back, our top 5 films of the decade. Stick with us, JawHeads.
Cinemajaw is sponsored by Jiffy On Demand.
Jiffy On Demand?
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. Wouldn't it be great if you had sort of an Uber for anything you need done around the house? You need an electrician. You need a plumber. You need an HVAC guy. Maybe you just need a light bulb changed or something broke.
That sounds lovely.
It is. It's fantastic. It's just as easy as calling an Uber, and all of their workers are vetted and licensed. These are guys that are trusted. And if for some reason something doesn't work out, Jiffy has a 100% satisfaction guarantee, Ryan.
So let me get this right. Jiffy On Demand is an app on the phone?
Yeah, it is. You just go to jiffyondemand.com or your app store, whichever phone you may use, Android or Apple, and download the app. It's pretty easy. And if you use the offer code Cinemajaw, you get $25 off your first Jiffy job.
Wow, save $25 by using the code Cinemajaw?
Yeah.
I love it. What cities can we use this in?
You can use it in Toronto, Ottawa, Boston, and Chicago, Ryan.
I love Jiffy On Demand.
You should. You need the help. And we thank them for their support.
And we are back on Cinemajaw celebrating the decade in film, Matt Kay.
This is fun, man.
This
I'm
is.
actually really stoked, feeling like in a great mood because of this.
Again, we have the great Pamela Powell joining us. Pam, for the listeners that want to read your reviews, find you online. Again, the best place to do so is?
You can take a look at realhonestreviews.com or realtalkwithchuckandpam.com.
During that first top 5, Matt, we had to use the fish tank a couple of times.
We did couple to a tree.
We threw a few in there. So let's open up that fish tank, because I know Pat wants to come out and say what his favorite film of the decade is. Let's open up that fish tank.
No pressure.
Wait a moment! It's fish! Isn't it?
DC! Wake up! Wake up!
No, Pat, it's a giant glass bowl. Hey, get some fish folk.
Who's coming with me besides Flipper? Here.
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
That's a lot of pressure. I literally have no idea. But yeah, so the first question that you guys had was what year Catherine Bigelow won Best Director, and that was 2010.
Okay. It was in
But,
this
but that was the Oscar 2010.
So it's 2009 film.
Just
Right.
missed the cut, right?
It makes sense. Yeah.
Black Hawk Down, right?
No.
No, Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker.
The next question was what year What We Do in the Shadows came out, and that was 2014.
Yes.
And yours was 2015, Wilder People?
Or 2016. I'll have to take a look
so
again.
it was right around there.
Yeah, right around there. 2016. So
Okay.
it's 2 years before I was
Nice.
wrong.
The next question was age of George Miller, and he is 74.
Oh, I was
You
way
guys
off.
were putting him in his 80s already.
No, I said septuagenarian.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I said 80 something.
Yeah. Was that everything?
The last question actually was the name of the movie about a missing girl, and the movie focused on screens and social media, and that was Searching in 2018.
A very interesting, unusual movie. I liked it quite a bit.
That was everything?
Yep.
Cool.
Jump back in that fish tank.
All right, will do.
If we have to open it up again, Matt,
We may.
we may.
I
We
have
can
a-
throw other facts into the fish tank.
I have a quick question for you guys. In compiling this list, what did you discover about yourselves or your taste that you didn't know maybe before?
Well, I think Pam answered it a lot when she preferenced her list.
Well, I'll go first if you guys need time to
Go
think on
ahead.
this. All right. So I mentioned to Pam a little bit off when we were breaking that most of these are female-centric stories. I didn't do that on purpose. It's odd. And the other thing is the color is super, super important. All of the movies on my list, with just a couple of exceptions, really use color in oversaturated, bright ways. I didn't know that going into this.
That's interesting. And ironically, being female, most of my stories are male-centric, which is kind of crazy. And I'd have to go take a look and see, but I don't think that many were written or directed by a woman, which is bothersome in some ways to me as well. Were they not available, or they just didn't speak to me, as I said before? So I don't know. It's interesting. But I do, every single one of these, they're very complicated films and complicated people within them.
What about you, Ryan?
I noticed I have, and you'll see it on my top 5 coming up here, heavy on some sci-fi.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And technology, and we'll get there. So
I think that's a foreshadowing. I might be able to guess where you're going.
we go into our 5s. Pam.
Cool. I'm counting up. I think I only have 2 out of my 10 that are directed by women.
I only had one.
Shame on me. But this one happens to be directed by a woman, and this is from 2018, and it's directed by Deborah Granick. I don't know if you remember her from Winter's Bone. Jennifer Lawrence was able to use that as a springboard for her entire career. But this is Leave No Trace. Yay!
Yeah, wow.
Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie. This is Thomasin McKenzie's first role, and it delves into the complicated relationship with a father and a daughter as they are living off the radar in the woods in Oregon and Washington. And it delves into post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, because Ben Foster's character of Will was in, I think it was either Iraq or Afghanistan, and he's suffering from that, along with a lot of other of these veterans that have no social welfare types of programs to help them out. They
do, but he doesn't want to be a part of it because of his PTSD.
Because of that, and I think with the social programs not being set up to acknowledge and recognize and deal with those situations, they don't do it in an appropriate way to help all these people who are living off the grid. I love backpacking and camping, so I learned a few little skills from watching that film as well.
Same.
But it was definitely not a humorous film, but I think it really delves into the complicated mechanisms of a father and a daughter and a young girl trying to be a teenager and live her life and still have the loyalty and love of her father. It was an emotionally loaded film that just really touched me in ways that a lot of other films do not.
I agree.
Well said.
I love that movie.
We were big fans also.
Were you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We both love this movie. Reviewed it on the Jaw, and I think we both gave it 4 Jaws.
Did
we
you?
loved it.
I think it's
Great.
Ben Foster's best.
I
bar
think it
none.
is too.
Yeah.
'Cause
Absolutely.
Sometimes he goes over the top a little bit, and he didn't in this performance.
He's very subtle.
And of course, we've had Thomasin had a chance to interview her
Yeah.
for Jojo Rabbit, and what a performance it was in there. I mean, to have a debut and have it be Leave No Trace is, the stuff of legend.
She's
for a
on her way
debut.
up, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. All right, that swings it back to me. And I'm a fan of horror, along with the Marvel pictures. I think a lot of fans of this show know that. So there were some good vampire movies.
Were there?
Yeah, in the top, in the past
Go
10
figure.
years. And I could have gone with Taika. I think What We Do in Shadows is fantastic, but I went with Jim Jarmusch, 2014's Only Lovers Left Alive.
Wow, this is refreshing, Matt. I love this one.
I love this movie. First of all, it's so boring to see another action vampire movie where people are getting stakes through the heart. I want to see the mundane things that they do when they're just being themselves and sitting around the house. Tom Hiddleston, obviously, I'm a huge fan from his performance as Loki in the Marvel pictures, and he gets a chance to play a slightly different character. Still dark, but it's great the way he sort of taps into the electrical grid, and he shows how they've existed for hundreds of years in this decaying Detroit metro area, and it's a really good, pensive, slow movie. And Tilda Swinton,
Right.
I think she's at her sexiest in this movie, which maybe sometimes isn't a word associated with Tilda Swinton, but there it is. And she's just tremendous. I fell in love with her because of this movie. Love it.
I love how interesting it was on the take of the vampires.
Right.
You're right. We just don't see this. So
Yeah. Even though there is some vampireness to it, there has to be some bloodshed, but it's more of a quiet vampire movie, and it's really interesting because of that.
And I believe it's set in Detroit.
It is, yeah.
If you got a vampire movie and it's set in Detroit,
A lot of empty
that's got Tilda
houses.
Swinton. I got to go see this thing.
It's really good.
And there is an emotional component to that one as well that I really enjoyed. Their whole relationship and how they balance things out. I thought that was kind of unique as well. Not
Right.
one of my favorite films, but
Very
definitely a
similar
unique
to
one.
Marriage Story.
Very.
They've forged this partnership that's lasted, God knows how long.
Longer than
Yes.
most marriages, right?
Right.
Swings it over to my number 5. This one came out in 2015, and I just said that looking at My list, I saw that I had some sci-fi, some technology, and this one hits on both those. It was a directorial debut. The director's name was Alex Garland. The film was Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this is the only film of the 10 that I have on my list that I did not see in the theater. So this was the one that I missed in the theater, caught up on one of those nights where I wasn't expecting that much. And I probably one of my favorite things is when you get a hold of a movie like Ex Machina, when you're not expecting anything great. It's just like, somebody
blows
said,
your mind.
Yeah, somebody said this Ex Machina is pretty good. I'll just throw it on. And I'm just sitting there mesmerized by the movie. The effects that they used here on
Alicia?
Alicia Vikander are fantastic. And eventually she does get, clothes on and a wig, but those first couple of shots when we see her and it's just the face.
The translucent
It's
skin.
crazy.
Yes. And that very first shot, I just rewatched this movie, also getting ready for this list, and I bought it on 4K, and I got my nice new TV, and watching it, it's just so gorgeous when first time he walks into the room to talk to her, she gets up and walks, and she's set up against a window that's showing the outside world, and that contrast between this technological being that we've created, man, and right behind her is nature, Mother Nature of the trees. The whole thing speaks volumes and the themes that it means. And there's a line in there where he says, if you created something such as the first artificial intelligence that can pass the Turing test, then aren't you considered a god? And Oscar Isaac loves that.
Right.
He gets like, yes, you're right. If I did pass, then I am a god. And it's a weird concept to think about. I mean, it's going to happen at some point where someone is going to officially do it and do it where we can't tell anymore. And
It's going to happen. I agree with you,
it's
man.
an amazing thing. And then the movie just moves into a place where it's thrilling, it's shocking, and beautiful. The way it ended, I remember just being thinking, this is the best. This is the best way they could have ended the film.
It's obviously you got some Frankenstein, Mary Shelley in there, and heavy on the sci-fi, the Turing test, and all that. And you're right, man. It's relevant to today's day and age with AI slowly advancing on us.
Right.
So.
And interestingly, I mean, Oscar Isaac, again, is brought up in one of our films. I think we've mentioned him at least 3 times, maybe 4 now. And I don't think Oscar Isaac is an everyday household name, yet we're finding that he's in our top 10s of a decade.
True.
Yeah.
Love the guy. My number 5, Ex Machina, into our 4s.
Cool. All right. That brings me to Manchester by the Sea from
Pam, thank you.
2016.
I tried to squeeze this one on, so good. Thank you.
Yeah, that actually got 250 nominations that year. 250. It won 129 awards across all the different platforms of all the different groups that are out there, which is pretty incredible. Casey Affleck stars in this film, and he got 2 Oscars, or there were 2 Oscars, and Casey Affleck was one of them, as well as original screenplay. 4 nominations for picture, as well as actor for Lucas Hedges and Michelle Williams, and for the director. This movie, I saw at Sundance, and they cut a few scenes when it came out of Sundance, which was actually a good thing. It moved a little bit more slowly the first time that I saw it. I saw it a second time, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Casey Affleck, I think this is definitely his best picture ever.
He should have retired after.
He probably should have. This is a film that I think explores things retroactively. We go back in time to be able to understand why is Casey such a brooding, lonely person? And then we understand, and we see his relationship with Michelle Williams' character. I think she was overlooked for the Oscar on that one. Mm-hmm. And then Kyle Chandler also as his brother, and we understand their relationship. And then Lucas Hedges, I think that was one of his first roles, if not his first role. And wow, he knocks it out of the park, and all of the relationships within that. I really like, and everything, talking about what you see as a common theme among all the films. Balance is also something that's very important to me, and this is really well balanced with all of the different characters and their relationships, and then going back in time and understanding them. It's a heavy film, as you had alluded to in one of your films, but this is also just a beautiful story of love and loss and healing and how we go forward.
A story on this one. Another one, I love thinking of seeing these in the theaters and that memory that I have of seeing
Right.
it. Another one that I had missed at the screenings, and I caught up on a Saturday morning, much like Inside Out, like how I had said, went to the theater, and the scene in particular was that crushing scene when Casey Affleck talks to Michelle Williams after.
Right.
I've said this to many people, I almost had to stand up because when you're crying, you don't almost feel right in sitting position sometimes. Like, I just wanted to stand and move because I was nervous. I didn't feel right. I'm very seldom affected the way I was during Manchester by the Sea at any other movie. I mean, that movie just crushed me.
So many powerful scenes when he's witnessing, he goes to the bar to get some more booze to bring back to his place, and he comes back to him. For those who haven't seen it, I'm not going to blow it for you, but he witnesses some pretty incredible things that, as a parent, none of us could ever imagine going through.
Right.
So, yeah.
Now I don't want to see it.
Oh, you haven't seen it yet?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's tough, but it's powerful. I would highly recommend seeing it.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's a great one.
Especially,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I got to see it. All
Okay.
right. That brings it over to me. And at number, what are we on? Four here? And at number 4, speaking of sci-fi, Gareth Edwards is a great voice in the genre. He gave us Monsters in 2010, which was totally out of left field, and then followed up with Godzilla. Now, say what you will, but I think it was a pretty decent movie, actually. But he did something pretty impossible in 2016. And here's my analogy, guys. I was thinking about this. When there's a brewery here in Chicago, Goose Island, and they were bought by Budweiser. And when they were, their flagship beers were brought to the Budweiser facilities in St. Louis or wherever they make all that beer, right? Leaving the Chicago brewery free to experiment and make different beers. And suddenly, because they had all these empty casks, they made some of the best beer that ever came out of Goose Island. Same thing with Star Wars. We had these flagship trilogies that just needed to be perfect. But they say, okay, Gareth, take a spin-off, do whatever you want. And lo and behold, he makes the best Star Wars movie, bar none. It is the best Star Wars movie. I'll say it again, just so everyone knows what I mean.
You mean of all the Star Wars movies?
Of all the Star Wars movies.
Wow.
It is on my list at number 4, Rogue One. Tremendous movie. It is the best Star Wars story. Obviously, this is the story about how the rebels stole the plans of the Death Star. Darth Vader at his best, and the scene where he's chasing down the rebels and just cutting them to pieces with his lightsaber and using the Force to slam them against the walls. I've rewatched that scene on YouTube probably 100 times.
Wow.
I show it to people when we start talking about Star Wars. I'm like, have you ever seen this? And they have to, just to understand Darth Vader.
I wish everyone could see the smile on your face right now as you're describing this. You look like a little kid in a candy store.
It's great. And the fact that they don't give us that Disney ending. I won't spoil anything for the 2 people who haven't seen Rogue One, but the fact that they just go ahead and tell the story honestly. A story about war and sacrifice. And it's good. It's way better than it should be. It's not cheapened by like plastic creatures and crappy storylines with ham-fisted dialogue. It's a damn good espionage war story that happens to be set in Star Wars. It's the sequel we should have gotten.
Obviously, I'm a big Star Wars fan. Love this one as well. But
Don't say but, Ryan. Don't say
but. We focus so heavily on how great the last, actually about half hour of this movie is. Maybe the best half hour of Star Wars there is. But it's a bloated movie. I think they could have cut it.
Don't say that. You're so wrong. Rogue One is awesome.
When I go back and I try to rewatch the whole thing and having it on Blu-ray, I end up fast-forwarding a little bit because I'm like, all right, let's get to the good stuff.
No. It's
shame on me, I know. But.
It starts right away with the backstabbing of the person you think is going to be a hero, and he's a murderer. He's a murderer. He's a bad guy, but he's still a rebel, and he's working toward good ends, but his means are questionable at best. And then the rest of the ragtag group, as it gets put together, you like them more and more. It's like the Goonies in space, but in Star Wars. I love it.
I am one with the Force. The Force is one with me.
Close enough.
I tried. All right, swings it over to my number 4. And I love when you have a movie where, let's say somebody is unfamiliar with the artist, and you can take one movie and show it to them and say, that's that artist. And it encompasses their talent and their skill and everything that they're about in one picture. It happened in 2014. people know I'm a big Wes Anderson fan. And for the longest time, I used to say Wes Anderson, my go-to was The Royal Tenenbaums. I thought this was his masterpiece. Can't be topped. Everything else is just sort of more Wes Anderson. But in 2014, he finally polished himself up to make what I think is his best movie in his filmography, The Grand Budapest Hotel. And again, I think if you were to show somebody, to say, what's a Wes Anderson movie? If someone had no clue what a Wes Anderson movie was, I could pick up The Grand Budapest Hotel and show it to them, and they would totally get every reference to everything. It would all just click in their heads and say, yep, now I know what a Wes Anderson movie is. The cast, terrific. As always, he gets basically anybody who he wants. But this time joining the cast was Ralph Fiennes. And he got robbed of even an Oscar nomination. He didn't even get nominated. But the movie itself, can we throw it in the fish tank? How many Oscar nominations The Grand Budapest Hotel got? It was quite a few. And it came out way earlier in the year. He got something like a February or March release. And it made it all the way to the Oscars and got a ton of nominations. The set design's fantastic. Everything. The colors, I know you like the colors.
Yeah.
The writing, it switches the aspect ratio at times, and that's funny. Bill Murray pops up. Everything about The Grand Budapest Hotel. And it's probably, out of the 10, the movie I've seen the most out of the decade.
I'm a Rushmore guy myself. But.
So
I loved that movie as well. And I think about the skiing scene. That's one of my
so funny.
favorite ones. And I don't usually recall different scenes in movies. Wes Anderson, I am a huge fan of The Grand Budapest Hotel. Great pick.
You still got to see this one.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know
yeah,
how
you
missed
got a
The
long
Grand
list there, bud.
I know.
I do.
Into our threes we go.
Ooh. All right, number 3. I don't know if you remember this film. It stars, it's actually a Alexander Payne movie who gave us The Descendants, Sideways, great movies. And it stars Bruce Dern, who I absolutely love, and anything he does too. He's kind of up there with Willem Dafoe. Nebraska from 2013.
Wow. Yeah.
Bruce Dern thinks that his character, Woody, I think his name is, thinks that he has won a mega $1 million sweepstakes thing that he had written away for, and he decides to go and collect it. And he ends up walking and then riding on a lawnmower. And his son, played by Will Forte, tries to intervene. This is a family relationship movie. And Woody, unfortunately, I think has a little bit of dementia going on with that as well. And a lot of things that I think a lot of us who are in our 40s and 50s that are going through with caretaking for our parents and what's happening with them. This is a slice of America. I mean, this is like truly America family here, and what the relationships are within them. And it's hilarious and it's thoughtful as they do. It's kind of like a buddy road trip movie of this father and son as they're traveling across the country to collect his prize. Loved this movie. Highly recommend it, from 2013.
Big fan as well. And it's so great that Bruce Dern sort of has made a comeback, right?
Yeah.
He was just in The Mustang?
Yes, he had a phenomenal role in The Mustang.
Yeah, it was a great role,
yeah.
for sure.
And
And Once Upon a Time in
He was
Hollywood.
in
Yes!
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood
I
as well.
loved him in that too.
Yeah, that was a great little cameo scene.
It
he
really
had.
was. It was an integral one too, wasn't it?
Oh, it
Yeah.
was. That entire ranch scene was fantastic
Yeah.
and capped off by Bruce Dern. So. Big fan of Nebraska. Good pick.
Absolutely. All right, that swings it back to me. Shifting gears completely from Rogue One. 2015, Ryan sent me to the theaters. You have to see this one. I think it was probably our review that week. And I've never
See
been...
all the good I do for him. You see?
Good friend.
I won't admit to it. The movie... Literally, people say this term quite a bit, where you were breathless. I think you talked about it earlier. There were moments in this movie, I don't have an Apple Watch, but I know I couldn't breathe, because I was just so tense and scared and going through the emotions that the characters were in Room. Absolutely, I don't know. It's just the emotional roller coaster is complete. What we see happen, and I also had a kid who was around the same age too when I was watching Room, so maybe it hit me even harder. What we see happen to Brie Larson's character when she's a captive in the room, and then the daring escape and the reuniting of the two characters, the mother and son, was one of the most cathartic moments that I can even think of in all of my movie watching history. But then to see sort of the aftermath, it's a full picture. We get this incredible story, which is sadly somewhat based in true events, but we get to see it from a bunch of different angles, like what happens to Jacob Tremblay's character after and how he kind of wants to go back to that world he knew. And it's so sad.
It is so sad.
It's a great movie, and I loved it. And it's one like sort of like that you can't rewatch, like a Requiem for a Dream, where you see it once and you never want to see it again. But I've actually watched it a couple of times, and I have to be in the right mood for Room, but it still hits me in the gut every time.
Oh, it's an incredible psychological film, and especially if you like delve in deeper and think about, you know, what the mother and the son went through, and then what their future is going to be once they've escaped that room and the interactions. It's a compelling story.
You know what film I could compare it to? Life is Beautiful. How she's able to shield him from the horrors that are his reality,
right,
and keep intact his childhood in some form. And she does that quite well. And then when they escape and he sees the larger world, he's almost scared.
Right,
or
overloaded.
He's not almost scared. He is. He's terrified of
Yeah.
everything he sees. It's a fantastic movie.
It is.
Great movie.
Great one.
Yeah.
Swings it over to my number 3. I think this is, yes, it is the only film on my list that won the Academy Award for Best Picture in the decade. So I do have one on there.
Wow.
I don't know if you guys had one on.
I wasn't really keeping score.
I was just looking at that as
I did.
I was looking, but it almost didn't win. Came out in 2016. The great Roger Ebert talks about movies being an empathy machine, and the idea that we get to see the world through other people's eyes. And I can't think of a better example than Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. My number 3. So.
Almost didn't win, right?
Right. That's why I say
Yeah.
almost didn't win, but it did pull out the Oscar from La La Land, and it told in 3 acts, and a lot of people are emotional on certain parts of the movie. For me, it was the second act where we see Sharon gets into a fight at school with a boy that he's had an experience with, and they are now pitted against each other to just basically, you know, be part of like the cool gang. And this kid ends up having to beat up Sharon. And it's that scene where he has to then go talk to the guidance counselor. And he can't even talk about his sexuality at this point. He's not old enough or mature enough to even talk about why everything is just crushing right now. It's nothing to do with just getting beat up in front of these other boys. It's so much larger.
Right.
And it was literally crushing to watch this scene unfold. And then the third act, you have him going to visit his mom, which is also just heart-wrenching scene. I mean, these are heavy emotional scenes. And when I'm thinking of a movie, can I relate in any way to the character of Sharon, of what he was going through? I couldn't be probably more different in the way I grew up, but that's why I love the movies, is that I can go and see this experience and hopefully learn from that and be emotionally moved, so that way when I see somebody or something in the real life, I've learned something from the movies emotionally and intellectually that makes me decide doing this instead of that and doing the right thing.
Barry Jenkins is an incredible filmmaker, absolutely wonderful.
He had another great one this decade in If Beale Street Could Talk.
One of my favorites from last year, absolutely. He's something with Moonlight, though, was the color palette, and you talk about colors a lot.
Yeah.
That's what, when you say that word, I bring in like subdued greens and just that feeling of devastation, I guess, and that was a very powerful film. Wasn't one of my top films of last year, but or was that 2 years ago now? 2 years ago, I guess, with La La Land.
2016.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, time flies when
Yeah.
you're having fun. But yeah, incredible filmmaker.
That was my number 3, Moonlight. Into our 2s we go. Heavy hitters, guys. Here we
Yeah.
go.
All right, number 2 for me is from last year, 2018, with Ethan Hawke in the lead role, and Paul Schrader writes and directs this one, First Reformed. This was a unique film. When I was watching, I think within the first 10 minutes, I think I was sobbing. This just really hit me hard when I'm watching this pastor of I think it was like a Calvinist church, who comes in to take over this small church that is overseen by a larger mega church. And seeing the difficulties that he's struggling with, he's got a lot of inner demons, and then wrestling with what he's seeing on the outside of his world with the political dilemmas, as well as the environmental aspects, and then meeting Amanda Seyfried's character of Mary. Coincidentally, she's pregnant at the time. And I can't even tell you how many different social issues are involved with this as far as, religion, environmentalism, politics, suicide, depression, alcoholism, all wrapped up into this one man who's trying to deal with his own issues as well as everyone else's and doing the right thing. And how far out do you go? It was an incredibly powerful film, and definitely Ethan Hawke's best performance, although he shows us that he can do a lot more than just the dramatic roles. And it was interesting to hear him talk about this film and how he made the film. Paul Schrader would say, do you want to do it again? And he's like, okay, I'll do another take. And he'd do it again. And he goes, you want to do it again? And he would keep going. But Paul Schrader finally said, I don't know, it was fine with me. It was good with you. He was like, I didn't have to do it that many times. It was fine with me. Why didn't you just say so? But yeah, incredible performance. And I think I think he's getting better with age, to be honest with you.
I
agree with that, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another film where it has an ending that you just want to come out and talk about because it's just so heavy.
It is, and he had 3 different endings to that film. And he, I guess, filmed the other 2 and chose the one that it ended with. And it's got a lot of, I think it's Flannery O'Connor has some references in that as well, the author. So, yeah, and definitely a lot of biblical stuff, too.
Big fan.
And Taxi Driver, a lot of references, homage
sure.
to Taxi Driver, which he also wrote and directed.
Yep.
Good pick.
Matt, can you follow it up at your number 2?
Yes. Earlier, well, I don't know if I can follow it up, but I have a number 2 pick. Earlier, Pam, you said you like documentaries, but you left them off?
I did.
Okay, I didn't.
Okay.
I love documentaries, and no surprise that I have one high on the list. This movie, I think maybe even changed my perspective on what a documentary could be and what a story can be and where art ends. Like, is what's on the screen the art, or is what's in your mind when you walk away from the screen the art? I don't know. But Banksy kind of tried to show us in 2010's Exit Through the Gift Shop.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is one of the most, if not the most, brilliant documentaries ever. It's not just what we see, because I think, it's the story of the rise of Mr. Brainwash. And of course, it is a documentary, so we get to see, like, Shepard Fairey and some of the other, like, really important street artists, and I think that a lot of that is very true, but there's parts of it that are questionable, right? And parts of it that sort of maybe a hoax, even though all the filmmakers have said none of it's a hoax, this is all like true story. I don't know. I still don't believe them. And the fact that the movie is called Exit Through the Gift Shop tells you that you've just been taken for a ride. So I don't know. That's such a thought-provoking thing. And I love this movie. I've seen it maybe a dozen times. And every time I watch it, I still don't know where the line is between what is the art. So I think that's why I keep going to it, because it still makes me think to this day, like, what is art? And that's the question, right? That's the big question.
How cool that you're still questioning whether or not it's real.
Right.
That you still don't have a definitive answer. That's art.
That is art. Yeah, it's a tremendous movie. It really is. Obviously, my second best of the decade.
Yeah, that's
I forgot about that one.
I did too. I didn't know that even came out this decade, to be honest. My guess would have been probably late last decade, 2010, huh?
2010.
Wow. So for my number 2, this is a film that has just risen and risen through my ranks, from seeing it to the point where it is sitting at number 2 of the decade. And I love when that happens, when you like a movie, but then you really love it. And now I watch it, and the ending, I think, is just literally incredible. And I go back to my theme of technology, sci-fi, probably the best shot movie maybe of the year, of the decade. 2017's Blade Runner 2049.
Okay. Yeah, this is good. Just missed my list. Just
Mine
barely.
too. Just by like 700. Just missed it.
So like I say,
it was closer to the 10 for me.
It's grown on me more and more. I liked it. I know it was on my top 10 in 2017. We were both fans. Wasn't my number one that particular year. I went back and I watched it again. And I was like, man, what a good movie. And then it was a film that I just couldn't get out of my head. And that's when I know I really enjoy it. I got to go back and I got to watch it again. Just recently had bought it on the 4K, full experience, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it literally is so beautiful to look at, this movie. But the scene I want to highlight here is this ending scene where Gosling is trying to rescue Deckard, who's played by Harrison Ford. And the vehicle that he is in is gone down. It lands on basically the beach, and the water is crashing in on the waves, and the vehicle is getting brought into the water. And you got this whole theme of what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human? And it just, this entire scene with the waves crashing, the music, Hans Zimmer again, should be noted, it makes you think of how life came out of the ocean, life came out of the water. And this wonderful moment where Gosling comes back out of the water attacking the girl, I forget her name in the movie, and it just is so visceral. It feels like the whole theme of the movie is taking place within the action sequence of the ending of this movie. And then it comes out, they walk out of the water fantastically, and you get this nice closing moment where they go to visit Harrison Ford's daughter. And it's in the snow. It's very elegant, very shot just beautifully. And the music of the main theme of Blade Runner 2049 starts to play, and Ryan Gosling lays down in the snow. And do we know if that snow's real? It's just beautiful.
It is. I mean,
I literally get a tear when I'm watching the movie. I'll always get like a tear just run down my cheek by the end of the movie. I'm so moved by it.
I mean, Blade Runner series sort of handed us cyberpunk, and I'm a huge fan of not only science fiction but specifically that Neo-Tokyo-esque cyberpunk world, and they created it. And I think 2049 was a fantastic entry. Jared Leto, not so much. That's the one part that really keeps this movie from being great. And I love Jared Leto, just not in this movie. But that's a minor gripe in what is otherwise a pretty flawless movie, man. It's really good.
Pam?
I'm outnumbered on this one, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. I will say, this is one of the few films of the reviews that I've done where I got like hate mail, like really
more than the Mad
stuff.
Max thing.
Yes, more than Mad Max. Can you believe it? So yeah, you know what? I love science fiction. Ex Machina, great film, and Blade Runner, incredible film, and I felt like Blade Runner 2049 was just a recreation of it and not as good of a form. It just didn't float my boat.
All right, it was my number 2 of the decade, Blade Runner 2049.
Sorry, we do agree on a lot, though.
But I do love this because me and Matt used to play a game on Cinemajaw, like you guessed it. We called it
I Jaw That Coming.
I Jaw That Coming.
Yeah.
Do you know what my number 1 is? Because I
No
don't
clue.
know what your number
clue.
1 is. I have no idea.
No, you mentioned the ones that I would have picked.
So-
Like I knew Ex Machina would probably be somewhere on your list.
I'm shocked. I don't know what Matt's is. I definitely don't know what Pam's is.
No?
I can tell you this much, guys. I'm pretty sure I'm going to disappoint you with my number 1. That's all I'm going to say.
Wow. Way to set it up, Matt. That's
Yeah,
great.
how about that for a setup? You're going to hate my number 1.
I'm going to guess. Well, I'm not going to guess, but I'm going to write it down what I think yours is going to be.
Before
I
we-
would put
see if it's right.
Before we reveal our number 1s, we
Yeah.
threw one item into the fish tank that we wanted to clear up. What was it, Pat?
That question was, how many Oscar nominations did The Grand Budapest Hotel get? And that was 9.
9.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is. I mean, for a Wes Anderson movie that came out, like I said, in like March of that year,
Yeah.
to go on to get 9 nominations,
Right.
it was well received.
Kind of like Get Out. That came out in February and won Best Director, I think, right?
Just missed my list for this as
Really?
well. Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, not Best Director, but it was nominated
something.
at least.
Yeah.
All right, here it is. This is Cinemajaw. These are our picks for the number 1 movie of the decade. Pam Powell, what do you got there?
All right. I have from 2014, Whiplash. Did you guys see it? Did you see it?
Yes, I saw Whiplash.
Okay. Miles
I
Teller.
love this movie.
Unbelievable. Again, just one of these films that really just resonates with me as a person and I think as a mother. Miles Teller plays a student in a conservatory who's a brilliant drummer, and his teacher, played by J.K. Simmons, ends up being emotionally abusive, sometimes even bordering on physically abusive, but wants the best out of Miles, and Miles wants the best out of himself, but is unwilling to go past a certain point, or is he? It's a strange relationship that the two of them have, and it's talk about best editing, and I think it won an Oscar for best editing. This is a film that makes the right cuts at the right time to just plunge you into every single scene so that you feel the emotion that each of the characters is feeling. Your heart breaks for what's happening, yet you want Miles to win. You want him to move on, but can he with this teacher that he has? My son had an experience with a soccer coach where it was the same kind of relationship, and it was at the same time, talking about room with having kids around the same age. Mm-hmm. My son was about the same age that Miles Teller's character is as well. So I think I really just kind of honed in on that as well. And I, again, glued to it, and I had tears streaming down my face. And I don't stand up when I cry. I think I curl up into a fetal position. But I noticed everyone around me was just hunkered down, and no one could breathe and talk because they were just so emotionally impacted by the story.
I remember walking down to the theater. The body just sort of felt shocked because the other thing was you don't know who exactly, quote unquote, won at the end. Like,
Did anybody?
Did anybody? Was he pushed to greatness? Is that what we really need to achieve that? Wow, what a film, unbelievable! And the one thing you didn't mention, the music in the movie.
Oh well, and that's with the editing, faster, slower, faster,
right.
slower.
A movie about timing.
Oh my God,
it's gotta have
yes, absolutely,
so good,
yeah.
so good. And Miles Teller didn't get the award recognition he should have got.
No.
I remember that year complaining because he had to drum to a degree anyways.
Right.
Not only did he have to act as good as he acted, but he had to
play an
make
instrument.
Make us believe that he could be one of the world's best drummers, jazz drummers.
And Damien Chazelle is the one. That was his first feature film, and it was based off a short that he actually had J.K. Simmons playing the teacher, Fletcher, I think his name was, but had somebody else playing the main role of Miles Teller's role. I can't remember his name. Andrew, I think it was. This was, I think, Damien Chazelle's best film as well. He did First Man, which I wasn't thrilled with, and
I've liked them all.
Right,
La La Land was just okay to me. It wasn't on my top 10 list.
I like that one as well. So,
do you think J.K. Simmons' best performance?
Oh yeah,
I think one of his best. But again, he's just one of these tried and true people that if he's in a film, he elevates it.
I agree.
Yeah, this
Back
is great.
in the MCU,
This is
you guys.
great.
All right, everybody's wondering what's my number one. This I wrestled with this choice quite a bit because it's weird, but
Maybe I don't know.
I had to be honest with myself. This is a movie. Rye has no idea what I have here.
I was going to write something down.
Here, write it down.
Write it down.
Write it down.
All right.
Let's see.
I
wrote
guarantee
mine
you're
down.
both wrong. I actually threw it out to Facebook.
Okay.
This is not where I got the idea because I had compiled this list and, like I said, struggled with it, moved things up and down. But being honest with myself, this is a movie that I've seen quite a few times.
I'm out.
It's an animated movie.
Oh, nope, I'm wrong.
And I think it's got the best music. It's a fun adventure. It introduces great characters. It's rewatchable, infinitely rewatchable. And at the end of the day, one of the best female empowerment feminist movies, I think, bar none, maybe of all time. Moana, 2016's Moana.
Wow.
Wow.
Matt has
Moana.
stunned the room.
Did not see that
No.
coming.
Stunned the room.
I did not either. I had The Witch.
Oh, I love The Witch. That was totally
different.
You think?
The Witch is my number 12. It just missed the list, and it was in the top 10 for a while. It got bumped down, but I mean, Moana is so awesome. I can watch it again and again and again. And yeah, it's a movie, it's a musical. I think maybe that's part of the reason why. But every song is like better than the last, and the end of the adventure when she like sort of finds her voice, it's inspiring. I don't know. I like this movie a lot. Obviously,
It's number one of the decade. That's huge. I haven't seen it.
You never saw Moana?
No, I missed it.
So I think Frozen sort of gave Disney its legs back, right? And then they just freaking knocked it out of the park. And like everyone was thinking this is going to be kind of stupid with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think we've learned, don't ever count The Rock out because
Ever.
Yeah, never, right? His Maui, man, they sold like 1 million toys. Another great character. And then speaking of Taika Waititi, his friend Jermaine Clement is in this doing the Tamatoa, this villain who has a great number. It's just a phenomenal animated
I do like
movie.
it. And the animation is fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Especially the ending scene. The whole sequence is fantastic, animation-wise. So
I have to watch Moana and Spring Breakers.
Yes.
Interesting that those two films made your top 10 list.
Well, I don't know. Maybe sort of there's some
all over the place.
commonalities
I like
in there.
it.
I don't know.
Swings it over to my number one, and I mentioned that I'm very big on remembering my theater-going experience. And I think when I put this list together and I wrote this down at number one, I thought, well, it's sort of fitting because I think it was my favorite theater-going movie experience of the decade. And the other thing is that I'm very big of talking about film as art, and that you can go see a painting and two people can look at that painting and have different emotions with it, but film is art. And I don't think a movie says that more than 2018's Roma.
Yeah.
Really?
My number one. And going back to that movie experience before I talk about it was I saw it at the Chicago International Film Festival, and whenever you see a movie at a film fest, it just has a buzz about it. This had already gone through the circuit, and now it was coming to Chicago. The buzz was high. The two main stars were going to be there. Didn't know what I was in for. Sat down, watched this thing, was just emotionally moved. And for the Chicago International, for this to happen, a standing ovation in the theater for the two stars. And I mean a 5-minute standing ovation.
Wow.
And it was, everybody was so moved by the ending of this film. I mean, just the journey that we went on. I don't know. There's no flaw in this movie. It's absolutely gorgeous. The cinematography is great, and I liken it to like watching someone's dream. We don't, this is like his memory. He's dreaming his memory up, and we're able to watch this. And somehow he pulled it off, his own little personal story, and he made it so universal. I was just in awe of Roma. I loved it.
I love how the movie rhymes. You know how it starts in the puddle with the airplane in the sky, and that's exactly where it sort of ends up, but actually in the sky this time. And we're watching the planes fly by. The planes are kind of a theme throughout the movie.
Right.
So I like that.
I love the symbolism, and I think the plane is part of a symbolism. When you see the reflection of the plane in the puddle on the ground, that's where, and I forget Yalitzia's name in the movie, the maid, that's where she is, and that's where she's considered in the family, yet she rises much like the plane in the sky.
Oh, that's interesting.
And by the end, she is a part of the family and a very important part of that family, and that's where the plane is. And it does. The planes are referenced throughout the entire film.
They are. And somewhat to my point, too, talking about this movie being like a very small story, personal story to him, but the planes also represent that it's universal in scale, right? So, I mean, you got this small family that it's dealing with, but we're seeing these planes overhead. There's a whole world out there, and this is just a reflection of other people's stories as well. We all have these, to some degree, of stories that we need to tell and relate with.
Right.
Rome was just incredible.
One interesting thing about this, we sort of started this whole conversation by saying, what's up with streaming? And this is a Netflix movie.
Right.
I did not catch it in the theater, and lucky for me that I didn't, because I was able to actually try the little kung fu challenge that the teacher issues, where you close your eyes and stand on one leg.
The tree pose.
I actually did that in my home. Were I in the theater, Ryan, I would not have gotten away with it.
Wow.
You would have been like, down in front.
This has been a blast. Let's go rapid fire some honorable mentions if you had them. Who wants to go first? Because I have a ton. Matt?
I wrote down 25. Okay, here we go. Rapid fire.
Nobody mentioned.
I'm going to put these in.
These are nobody mentioned.
Nobody mentioned these.
Go ahead.
Okay.
do you got?
From 11 down to 21. Into the Spider-Verse, The Witch, 3 Billboards, Blade Runner 2049, 8th Grade, Joker, Get Out, Shutter Island, Lego Movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Logan.
Wow. Still no mention of The Social Network.
You know, I almost mentioned that. That was my first film that I reviewed. And so that one will always be special to me. I don't know if that was that great of a film or not, but it's very special.
Boyhood, loved it. La La Land, still a big fan. My favorite film back when this came out, I believe it was 2010, 2011, Shame. With
Yeah, you like this one quite a bit.
I liked that one.
Absolutely. We have not talked about 2019 enough, but Parasite, Marriage Story, Her, I love Her.
Yeah, I love Her a lot as well.
And believe it or not, Arrival. I had that.
Oh, I
written down
loved
as well.
that one.
Arrival's
Amy
good.
Adams, yeah.
You do like you some sci-fi, huh? All right.
And I kind of alluded to my other ones before. Wildlife, Roma was definitely on my make it or break it. The Irishman, I thought was incredible. Another Netflix film. Capernaum, a foreign language film.
Still
that
gotta catch up with that
Oh,
one.
my goodness. Incredibly powerful. And then American Animals.
I like that one.
I didn't like that one at all.
You didn't?
Totally
I've seen that a few
disconnected.
times. Really?
You're thinking of Nocturnal Animals.
Oh, you're right.
The ones that are awake during the day, the American animals, not the
Yeah.
nocturnal ones.
Right. American Animals.
It's easy to confuse those titles.
Matt
Give
would
me-
actually
cut
like
me a break.
American
You know,
Animals.
I would think you would because
You
it
would.
kind of blends in documentary with the, I guess, recreation and breaking the fourth wall. It's an integration of a
Okay.
lot of different filming styles about a library heist
and a
in
heist. You would
Lexington,
love it.
No,
Kentucky.
I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah, I have a.
This was last year, right?
No, this is a few years ago.
2 years
2
ago, I think, yeah.
I have a projector and I put movies out on my deck and I have friends over and that
Oh,
was
nice.
the first selection I had. So we sat out on my deck and I hadn't seen it at the time, but I knew from the buzz I had of friends, I was like, this is going to be good. And everybody's like, what is this movie? We all loved it.
It's a crazy, strange movie, and I loved it too. One of my top 10, I think, of that year.
Good stuff. It's been a hell of a decade.
It has. It
Lots
really
has
has.
happened.
And interestingly, it's gotten better as we've gotten toward the close of the decade, I think.
I guess so.
Yeah. Less from the early part, more from the latter part.
Yeah, I think 2019 struggled for about 10 months.
Yeah.
I think it definitely got better in November and December, which will be fun to hear your guys' top 10 list for 2019.
Indeed.
This has been a blast. First and foremost, we got to thank our guest, Pam.
Thank you so much, you guys, for having
Thanks
me.
for
It's
coming
always
on.
a lot of fun.
Top
And,
10 of the decade.
This
Thanks.
was huge.
and thank you for not making me do trivia.
In 10 years, Pam, will you come back and do top 10 of the decade again?
Absolutely.
We'll have you back before then.
We also got to thank our producer Pat.
Yeah, it was a good time, guys. Thanks for having me.
We also got to thank our sponsors.
Yes, thanks to Jiffy and Overcast and all the great sponsors the Chicago Podcast Co-op helps us get.
If you want to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is by leaving us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And while you're there, please click subscribe. It's one extra button, helps us out tremendously.
Until next week, I'm Ryan the Movie Guy.
I'm Matt Kay, and keep on jawing about the movies.